Hi, Lyndsey. Thanks so much for joining us on Britain's Birth Stories podcast.
Hiya.
Hi. Would you like to begin by telling us who is in your family and where are you based?
So, I live with my husband. We've got a 3-year-old, Max, and then I've just had little Beatrice. She's 17 weeks old now, and we live in Newcastle.
Amazing. And I heard Beatrice is someone who likes sleeping while you're quite active, as you've said.
Yeah, she likes to be pushed to sleep.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, why don't we get straight into your first pregnancy? Was that something that you'd thought about, or did it just sort of happen?
No, we weren't married at the time, and we'd kind of said before we'd settled down, got married and had children, we would, have one last, big travel, we'll go somewhere. And then, one day I was like, oh my God, I can't get out of bed. Didn't know what to do with myself. So I'm a nurse, and I was a bit I just couldn't pull myself round, and I just felt dreadful.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, what would I do at work to somebody who had said that? So I thought, I'll do a pregnancy test just to rule that out.
Yeah.
And there it was, positive, and I was like, oh my God.
Oh, wow.
So obviously, we're over the moon, and, we weren't really bothered that had happened. So yeah, that was that, and away we went with it.
Amazing. And how did you feel during that pregnancy?
So that pregnancy, I was more really excited. We didn't know what to expect. I knew, for much as I was a nurse, I had no idea what was coming. I didn't know about midwife appointments or going for scans or anything like that.
Yeah.
And then it was oh, you have to come every so many weeks, and I was thinking, at work?
Yeah.
But obviously, and then work were yeah, that's totally normal. You just go to the.
All right.
So that was that really for, was like I say, really excited.
Yeah.
A new hospital had been built where we lived, and we're oh, we'll have the baby there, and that'll be obviously really nice. And
Yeah.
Sean could have his own room, which is quite unusual for a hospital for the dad to be able to stay over.
Yeah. Yeah.
So obviously we're really excited about that.
Oh, that's great.
And the pregnancy went really well.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. And how did you feel in terms of support from family and even just the services that you were engaging with while you were pregnant?
So our family was great. They were really excited. Their thoughts were thank God for that, it's about time.
Right.
So they were really good. The maternity services weren't great from that hospital. Towards the end, I had quite a lot of reduced movement, and they were just oh yeah, that's normal. Drink a can of pop, go in a hot bath, do this, do that. And I thought, if my baby's not moving,
Mm-hmm.
I think, you need to see is not suggest I drink a can of pop.
Yeah.
To stimulate them. That's quite an old-fashioned thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, by the by, and he was absolutely fine.
Amazing. And how did your labour begin, and how did you progress through that?
So I got to 41 weeks.
Wow.
And so I had SPD.
Right.
So I decided enough was enough. He needs to come out now. So I was induced. And again, I wasn't really sure. I wasn't really explained the induction process.
Mm-hmm.
So we went in quite early in the morning. And then just a lot of students came in, and, just had a bit of a chat, and I was thinking, when's this going to start? So they'd started with a pessary in the afternoon, and then I think it got towards midnight, and I hadn't really made any progression. So they decided to put up the drip.
Right.
And then from the drip going up, it was going from 0 to 10 very quickly,
Mm-hmm.
very painfully, which I don't know why. I just wasn't expecting expecting that.
Yeah.
Anyway, and then just the whole thing I wasn't really expecting, I wasn't really prepared for. You know, like the gas and air I wasn't really using very well. And the midwife, she was lovely, but didn't really, you know, she wasn't saying this is how you do it. You know, I was just not doing it properly. I wasn't getting like the best, you know, effectiveness from it.
Yeah, yeah.
So then I'd said I wanted an epidural, which didn't really work. But anyway, in the end, they kind of said, you know, you need to start, you know, making a bit more effort to push this baby out. Otherwise, we'll take you to theatre. You'll end up like with a forceps delivery, which I think spurred us on quite quickly.
Yeah.
And out he came.
And how was the pushing stage for you?
So I don't really, that bit of his labour, I don't really remember.
Yeah.
You know, like when me and Sean talk about the two different labours, like Sean said, you know, I wasn't really making a great deal of effort. I wasn't really engaged in what was going on. You know, I think I was just hoping that by some miracle the baby was just going to come out themselves.
Yeah. And when he eventually did come out, how was that for you for the first few hours?
So that was great. It was really good. The hospital, so from that point, as soon as he was out, the hospital were really good. Obviously, they pushed breastfeeding quite a lot, and we ended up staying in hospital for 5 days to try and establish breastfeeding.
Right.
And it didn't happen because he just wasn't interested. He ended up losing quite a lot of weight and became jaundiced because he wasn't feeding.
Right.
So then we just said, you know, the decision to just bottle feed him, that's what we're going to do. Obviously to get rid of the jaundice. And then after that, we got sent home. And I'd had quite a lot of pain. My temperature was really high. And I was like, I rang them back and I said, you know, I'm quite poorly. I'm not well at all. This pain's worse than the actual labour. You know, and they kind of just said, oh, it's just normal after pains. And I was thinking, this isn't an after pain. Like, my temperature's really high.
Yeah.
I'm quite worried. And on day 14, I went back to have the rest of the placenta taken out. Right.
So had it retained?
So there was quite a lot of placenta left behind.
And after that had been handled, how were you feeling?
Oh, it was awful, because I felt like, you know, I'd said to them, you've palmed me off for a week now, you know, saying that it's just normal, and this isn't normal. You know, I felt dreadful, and, you know, you had every answer under the sun except the most obvious one, that there was a bit of placenta left.
Oh, that's such a shame. And in terms of that postnatal time, how were you overall after experiencing that as well?
So it was awful. So when I went back to theatre, so I went back to the ward that we stayed on after delivery, but I didn't really want Max in the hospital anymore.
Yeah.
So I stayed with my mum while obviously I had the operation, and then like the nurses came in and they were like, oh, you know, really your baby should be with you. And I was thinking, well, you weren't capable of looking after me and listening to me, so I definitely don't want my son here.
Yeah.
You know, and obviously I ended up going home quite quickly, but it was just a really sad time. Like, it just wasn't perfect, which I think is what a lot of people envisage it to be. You know, those first few weeks of living in your lovely little bubble, it just wasn't that.
Well, I also think a lot of people put pressure on first-time parents, and obviously there are the horror stories that you're told, but also there's people who say it's going to be amazing, it'll feel so great, and you do build your hopes up quite high, and some things do happen that you never expected or planned for, and then it can have a really harsh effect on people because they just keep wondering, why didn't I get that experience everyone was talking about?
Yeah. Well, so I decided that I wanted a chat with them about that, because I thought, what happened if that happened to somebody else and they were just told, oh, that's normal? I said to them, postpartum sepsis can kill people.
Yeah.
So I was a bit more switched on to that. Mm-hmm. But if that was somebody else, they might not have been. And then what would you have done?
Yeah.
It just wasn't the safest thing to do. And I think from going that way with it helped.
Yeah, definitely.
To get some answers. And they were like, actually, yes, we're really sorry. We recognise what's happened. And then they changed their postnatal care.
Mm-hmm.
And some of it. So obviously, I'd said about the antenatal care as well. I said, when obviously we had the reduced movement and things, I said, my advice was quite old-fashioned. And again, my advice postpartum was old-fashioned. So they'd ended up changing their service to, a proper triage service, so that, women were listened to and brought in, and had a quick examination. And on that examination, if things were normal, then, the advice would be from there, as opposed to just, oh, well, that's normal after pains, get on with it sort of thing.
Yeah, definitely. And good for you for having the strength to be able to question and to take that further for yourself.
Yeah,
definitely. So as you'd gotten over that initial difficulty and continued to live with your baby in your bubble, when did you think about maybe having another child? Was that something you'd thought about, or did that just come up?
So my husband he says now, 17 weeks later, when are we going to have with it, baby?
Right.
But said, maybe we'll wait till Max is a little bit older, till he's at school. So he's had his time with us.
Yeah.
So we'll wait till he goes to nursery. And then we decided that we're going to get married, was the other thing.
Oh.
So we got married, and we said we would hang on till then. And then we would just, as soon as we were married, we would try for a baby. So we got married in November last year.
Lovely.
And then we ended up going to New York for our honeymoon. Oh. And when we came back from New York, I turned up at work the next day, and they were like, oh, you shouldn't be here. This isn't your shift today. And I was thinking, oh, God, how have I made such a mistake? And anyway, I was like really, really tired. I couldn't pull myself round. And again, Sean was like, maybe you're pregnant. And then there we were, pregnant again.
And how were you feeling?
We were just absolutely over the moon that it happened so quickly.
That's amazing.
Obviously, I was quite worried. I thought, maybe it won't happen so easily the next time. What if we're going to be trying for years? And
right.
And I was like really overcome. I was just like, oh, I can't believe that this has happened so quick. So that was all lovely until March and the pandemic hit.
Oh yeah, definitely. And how was that pregnancy for you?
So I was absolutely terrified. The midwife, my community midwife, was like, you need to leave work. Because would you put your baby, obviously with being at work, she was like, would you put your baby, just because they're inside of you, would you put a baby on the outside at risk with somebody next, like with COVID? So obviously that was really awful, and work said, yep, away you go. So I went off work at 20 weeks pregnant.
Right.
So I had a long time at home, which was lovely. I had a long time at home with Max. And he had that time that he would never have had. Max was born and he was 9.5 pounds.
Wow.
So we had growth scans this time just to make sure that obviously the second baby wasn't going to be as big or bigger. And at the second growth scan, they had said oh, your baby's tummy looks really big. Here's a blood sugar monitoring kit. Do that and ring this number and let us know how you get on. And I was like, whoa, wait. I was like, what do you mean? Like, what's the problem?
Yeah.
And this was at like 4:00 in the afternoon. And they were like, well, you might have gestational diabetes, so, you know, we just want to rule that out.
Right.
Gestational diabetes. I was like, well, you need to tell me a bit more about this, but obviously the clinic was closed and that was that.
Mm-hmm.
So I went home and Googled immediately gestational diabetes and what that would mean for pregnancy, for the baby and for me. And obviously one of the biggest risk factors of it is stillbirth.
Yeah.
And at that point, I wanted the baby out there and then.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was like, I need to know everything about this. I need to know what are you going to do? Like, the information we'd had was just so minimal. You know, here's a blood sugar machine, off you go.
Yeah.
And I was a bit like, all right. And then, so I'd monitored my blood sugar, and one reading out of the week was slightly high, and that was it. They were like, yep, start you on metformin straight away. And I was thinking, start me on metformin. And obviously changed my diet completely, and I was thinking, it's just one reason. And I was like, looking up the nice guidelines, and they were like, no, we're not taking the risk.
Right.
And that was fine. I was just like, right, okay. They said I would be induced or have a section in 38 weeks. And I was thinking, this is really overwhelming. I don't understand, like, where this has all come from. And then we had the last growth scan. Like, our head, our tummy, and our femur were all massively in line. And they said that could, like, it was unlikely that it was gestational diabetes, but let's just go with it because we've come this far now, and I was being induced a week later.
Right.
So there was no point in changing anything. So I went in for induction at 38 weeks, obviously on my own, because Sean couldn't come. So that was fine. I wasn't really bothered. I thought, well, I know what's coming this time, so, you know, that's fine. And they were really lovely. It was almost as if COVID didn't exist on that ward. You know, the midwives, you know, there was only 4 women in the induction bay, and we all, like, made friends and had a good little chat and bounced on the ball together. The midwives kept coming in and checking we were okay, and just having a chat, and it was almost as if, like, that was normal. And then, obviously, because I'd had a baby before, she said after the pessary it would be really likely that they would be able to break my waters. So after 4 hours, she said, yes, we can just go ahead and do that. So I was moved to a room, and she'd said, you know, yes, we can do it, ring your husband now. So I rang Sean and said, come now. So waters went, and then I decided that this time I didn't really want an epidural. I wanted to be more in control of what was going on, a lot more aware. I'd done quite a lot of hypnobirth and, like, practice beforehand.
Amazing,
and I took the TENS machine with us as well. And that whole labour, it only lasted 2 hours. But that whole labour was very quick, very calm. It was just so different to the first one. You know, I was really aware of what was going on. Like, I was aware of every contraction, and that it was, you know, going to be time to meet my baby. And then I'd got a bit, I think towards the end, I was really irritated. You know, I'd said, I need to go to the toilet, I need to get off the bed. I was desperate for a wee, and they were saying, no, this is your baby, come in, you need to listen to your body, this is your baby. And I was thinking, it's not my baby, I need a wee. Why is no, like, and I was thinking, the toilet is like 2 meters away from me. Why aren't they letting me go? And I was like begging Sean, I was like, please tell them I don't want to have, like, wee on the bed. And he was going, Lyndsey, listen to them. And she said, just push and see what happens. And I pushed and she came out. So it was very, very quick. And she said that she wasn't, obviously, they weren't expecting that. So we obviously delivered her, and that was great. And I'd said, so part of the gestational diabetes guidelines is to feed them quite quickly. And I thought, well, I don't want to try breastfeeding this time. I just want to feed her. So Sean fed her. And then they noticed I had quite a big postpartum hemorrhage.
Right.
So I lost 2 litres at that time. And they were obviously quite worried about that. They pulled like the alarm, the doctors all came running in. And things had gone from being really calm to really chaotic really quickly.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, but I feel fine. What's all this fuss about?
Yeah.
And then I think when people came in, they noticed that Beatrice wasn't breathing very well. So she was taken to special care, and then they'd said, we're probably going to have to take you to theatre to try and stop this bleeding. And I was thinking, yeah, absolutely not taking me to theatre. This isn't going to happen again. So they'd agreed that after an infusion and a couple of injections that I could, hang on, and it did stop bleeding. So I was quite relieved that I didn't have to go.
Yeah.
But obviously then Beatrice was in special care at that point.
And how did she progress?
So they'd started her just initially on oxygen. Sean was sent home, and they increased her oxygen to like a non-invasive ventilation. And then a few hours later, when I'd gone to see her, they'd said, we're quite worried about her now. She needs to be fully intubated. And obviously that just hit me like a ton of bricks. I was thinking, this is the worst case scenario. Why is this happening? And obviously, so their explanation was the delivery was so quick that she wasn't squeezed properly on her way out.
Right.
So obviously all the amniotic fluid that was inside of our lungs wasn't squeezed on our way out. So obviously it was still there, which was giving her difficulty breathing. And they just said obviously the intubation and the medication that they could give, to make our lungs stronger would help. And obviously that was, there was no choice in that. That was what they had to do.
Yeah.
So she was ventilated for 2 days, which obviously was the worst time of my life because me and Sean couldn't visit together. We couldn't see each other at all. So I was like sat on the ward with no baby when Sean was visiting, or I was sat at her bedside with no husband, terrified that my baby might die.
Yeah.
So, but after that, I'd gone down and they said her blood gas had massively improved and that they were they were going to extubate her and she didn't need oxygen. She was fine and she could go back to the ward. And I thought, this is obviously brilliant. This is the best news. And then we were back on the ward just 24 hours and they said we could go home.
Amazing.
So she turned herself around really, really quickly.
And in terms of when you eventually did get home, how was that transition from 1 to 2 from you?
So I thought, what's one more? One more is like having a tornado in your house. That's like the best way I can describe it. Like our lovely calm house with our 3-year-old was just turned upside down, but in the best way. Like, he loves her. He thinks that his little sister is the best thing that's ever happened to him.
Yeah.
And it was difficult. Like, I was really worried about getting out and going to nursery, but it just happens. Like, I don't even know what routine we're in, but it just happens.
Yeah. And what about you personally? How was that postnatal period? Obviously, you'd had quite a difficult time
So,
initially again?
so our health visitor is incredible, and she just came every week, and she said, she said, I've obviously known you for a couple of years now with having the other one.
Yeah.
She said, I've always thought you put on a front. She was like, it's almost as if you put this face on when you answer the door to me. And she was like, and I've always thought she's not as strong as she makes herself out to be.
Mm-hmm.
And then that was that. I think the floodgates just opened, and she was like, I'll come every week, it's fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I was like, I'm so traumatised that I think the level of knowledge of your baby being in special care and being intubated, if that hadn't worked, there was nowhere else to go. Like, that was it. Where options of getting it better were obviously very limited. If that hadn't have worked. And I think knowing that, really, really got to me. And seeing my baby at the most fully that a human could be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think, how has this happened when, I've been at home, I've ate well, I've really looked after myself, I've walked, loads and kept myself really fit and healthy, and how has this happened?
Yeah.
And to be told it's just one of those things wasn't enough.
Right, yeah. And definitely because you've got a medical background, that's of course going to play on your mind even more, isn't it?
Yeah, but our hospital that we had, so we delivered at a different hospital this time, and this hospital has like a birth reflections service.
Yeah.
So I had that, and that was the best thing that I think I could have done, like their explanation of what happened and, step by step, everything that, happened, not necessarily went wrong, because nothing went wrong. It's just, it was unfortunate that push came out.
Yeah. And after you'd engaged with birth reflections, how have you been personally for postnatally?
Much better. And, when I've spoken to other people who've just had babies, a really good friend of mine had a baby a couple of days earlier, and her labour wasn't as, the labour that she expected. She had a forceps delivery. Right. And she was like, why did that happen? And I said, why don't you just ring the birth reflections and they'll tell you step by step your entire day. The whole time you were there, they'll explain what happened and why it happened, why you needed to have that. Mm-hmm. And I think that totally turned this round. And obviously the fact now that we've got her, she's home, she's fine, and looking at it that way, it was just a bit of a bumpy start.
Yeah. And you being a nurse, when you had chose where you were gonna have your children, did you give birth at the place that you work at, or did you choose different places?
No.
Right.
Because I didn't want to. I thought, if anything goes wrong or I need, to go to theatre, there's a high chance of knowing somebody.
Yeah.
And I thought, do I want to know somebody when I'm in labour?
Yeah.
Probably not.
Right. Right.
And then in hindsight, I think my trust in people that I know would have been much better.
Yeah.
So obviously the second time round we delivered in the place that I work, and I knew that at that point, that there was people that I know that if things go wrong, I trust these people, I know them, I see them on a regular basis, they are going to put our best interests first.
Yeah. And that's amazing, because to know the people around you during such a sort of personal time can be a gift sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, like one of my friends, she was a midwife, she wasn't at work that day, she was like, but if I am at work when you're there, I'll come in and I can help. And I was thinking, and she said, I can speak to people and let them know that you're there and that you're worried. you know, so it was just a much calmer experience, the initial bit,
Yeah.
until obviously she went to special care.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, honestly, I'm so thankful that you've come on today and really told your truths and your experiences, because people do need to know that the realities for some others, and it doesn't have to be horrific or really, really terrible. It just needs to be something that's accepted and supported and heard, and I thank you so much.
Oh, it's absolutely fine.
Yeah.
You know, and while my births weren't perfect, I've got 2 perfect little children out of it.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And as a nurse, thank you so much for everything that you're doing currently or have been. Thank you, honestly.